The chamber walls trembled with each distant impact, and Chancellor Vekran's clenched fist slammed onto the marble table, scattering data tablets across its polished surface. Around him, high-ranking ministers argued, their voices sharp and panicked, but none dared meet his eyes for long. Outside the council spire, flashes of light rippled across Korth Prime's skies, where the Imperial fleet, the strongest in known space, was losing. "Get them back in line," Vekran snapped, at his defense minister, who stammered about losses and miscommunication. He already knew what they weren't saying aloud. A single ship, one vessel without escorts, had entered orbit and erased an entire battle group in less than 3 minutes. The Empire had faced rebellions before, pirate raids, even species uprisings, but nothing like this. Nothing this precise, this fast, this utterly dismissive of their power. On the central screen, the unknown ship hung against the planet's orbit like a blade held at their throat. It dwarfed their carriers, its silhouette black and unadorned, radiating heat and energy, far beyond safe thresholds. It wasn't firing now, not even moving, as if it already owned the space it occupied. The comms officer whispered, almost afraid to be heard, "Sir, they are still not responding to any hail. They have ignored every Imperial frequency." Vekran rose from his seat, voice steady but seething. "Then we force them to answer. Deploy the remaining intercept wings. Full burn. If they don't move, cut them apart." Far above the capital, aboard the human Dreadnought Resolute, Commander Nate Carter stood silent on the command deck, watching as the Empire's fighters spread in formation. His hands rested easily at his sides, though his eyes stayed locked on the tactical readouts. Tessa Morgan, communications officer, leaned forward over her console, her face pale, but her voice steady. "They're coming in hot. You want me to open a channel?" "No," Nate said, finally moving to the command chair. "Weapons hot, shields at 70. Show them what they're up against without killing them all." The Dreadnought's forward batteries rotated with mechanical precision, locking onto key ships. When the intercept wings closed to weapons range, Resolute fired one calculated burst of its main spinal cannon. The shot didn't vaporize ships. Instead, it ripped power systems offline, disabling half the formation in seconds. A second volley shredded the Empire's command frigate's engines, leaving it tumbling powerless. The Dreadnought never moved, never even changed position, like a predator too certain of its place to stalk its prey. Back in the council chamber, silence fell as one feed after another went dark. Only the Dreadnought remained, perfectly still, an unspoken warning in its posture. The ministers looked to Vekran, faces pale, waiting for orders. His voice cracked, just slightly, as he growled, "Who are they?" The main holoscreen flickered, static rolling, then cleared. A single human face filled the feed. The voice was calm, almost casual, but carried a weight that froze everyone in place. "Surrender, or we decide for you." For the first time in decades, the Empire's leaders felt their stomachs sink, realizing they were no longer in control. The command deck of Resolute was quieter than the vacuum outside. The ship's main display still showed the Imperial formation breaking apart, their crippled ships drifting in orbit like debris already resigned to gravity's pull. Commander Nate Carter leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking softly. His expression didn't match the magnitude of what they'd just done. It was not satisfaction, not triumph, but something heavier. Tessa Morgan unbuckled from her station and walked to his side, wiping grease from her hands onto her jumpsuit. "We just disabled half their fleet without so much as scratching the paint on ours. That's going to scare the hell out of them." Nate didn't look up. "It should—" "You don't sound thrilled," she said. He let out a long breath. "Because it doesn't end here. They'll either surrender or double down, and history says empires don't like the word surrender." Tessa leaned against the console, glancing at the rest of the crew. "So what's the play? Intimidate them into folding, or burn the whole empire to the ground?" Nate's jaw tightened. We're not conquerors. We're making sure what happened to the Calyx colonies doesn't happen again. At the mention of Calyx, the room fell into a shared silence. The Calyx colonies were humanity's early attempt at deep space settlement, wiped out 20 years ago in what the Empire called an unfortunate incident involving pirates. But Earth had intercepted Imperial transmissions back then, proving those pirates were state-funded. After that day, humanity had gone dark, closing borders and quietly building warships the galaxy had never seen. On Korth Prime, panic spread like wildfire, despite the government's best attempts to control the narrative. Civilians gathered in plazas and transport hubs, staring at feeds replaying the same terrifying footage. Imperial destroyers disabled with surgical precision, Dreadnought weapons glowing faint but cold in orbit. The idea that the Empire could lose was unthinkable, yet now it played on repeat in every home. In the council chamber, Chancellor Vecren stormed from one minister to the next, barking orders to double garrison deployments and prepare for planet-wide martial law. We will not be humiliated by one rogue ship. Mobilize the Leviathan fleet from our outer rim holdings. Bring in the Veyran legions. If they want a war, we'll give them one. His defense minister hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Sir, the Leviathans will take days to arrive, and this ship, it neutralized 5 capital carriers without lethal fire. If they have more like it, Vecren slammed his fist on the table. They don't. No one builds ships bigger than ours. No one. Do your job. But even as he spoke, there was doubt in his eyes. He knew what the ministers were thinking. If one ship could do this, how many more might be waiting? Back on Resolute, a small room below the main deck hummed softly as encrypted files flickered across a private console. Nate stood alone, scrolling through images of burned-out settlements, human bodies left in the wake of old Imperial pacification campaigns. The same hands that crushed rebellious species had once tried to crush humanity itself. Tessa's voice came from the doorway. You're looking at them again? He didn't turn. Just reminding myself why we're here. You think they'll believe we're not here to conquer them? She asked, stepping closer. They'll believe whatever their propaganda tells them. That's why we don't negotiate with tyrants. You take away their power first, then you offer peace. If they won't take it, Nate's fingers tightened on the console. You make sure they never get the chance to hurt anyone. Else again, a sensor alert chimed from the main deck. Tessa hurried back to her station, frowning at the incoming readings. Commander, we've got a new contact inbound. Big one. They launched something from their secondary yard. Mass readings off the charts. Nate stepped up behind her, scanning the data. It wasn't a fleet formation this time. It was a single weapon platform the size of a city, an orbital cannon nicknamed in Imperial intelligence files as a planet breaker. It was heading straight for Resolute. The crew froze as the magnitude of it sank in. They had seen one used in old recordings, a single shot capable of reducing a city to glass in seconds. Nate's voice cut through the tension, firm and unshaken. Helm, plot intercept, full burn. Tessa, keep hailing them. Tell them if they fire that weapon, we will respond in kind. She swallowed. And if they don't answer? Then we make sure they never fire it. The planet breaker was a monster. Of a weapon. An orbital cannon ringed with defensive platforms and armored plating thicker than most warships. It had been built to terrify entire star systems into compliance, to erase cities with a single discharge. Now it sat charging above Korth Prime's outer moon, its surface shimmering as power conduits glowed red-hot Resolute closed the distance. Fast. Engines screaming as the Dreadnought broke past the orbit of the moon and lined up a direct approach. Inside the command deck, tension ran like static. Every officer had eyes locked on their stations, but no one spoke louder than a whisper chief. Engineer Malik wiped sweat from his brow and glanced at Nate. Main reactor's already redlining, just holding shields at this level. If they fire that thing, we'll feel it even through the plating. Nate stood with one hand on the command chair, eyes fixed on the tactical display. We're not giving them that chance. Arm the spinal cannon. Prepare to intercept their power. Core. Tessa's hands danced over the comms panel. Still no response from them. They've gone completely dark. Figures, Nate muttered, then raised his voice. Target lock in 5. Fire on my mark. The Empire's defense fleet surged into formation to protect the planet breaker. Heavy cruisers moved to block firing lanes, while fighter wings screamed out in tight arcs. They were fast, aggressive, and unafraid of dying for their empire. The first wave hit resolute like a storm. Laser fire sparked harmlessly against adaptive plating, but missile salvos pushed the Dreadnought's shields dangerously low. The ship's automated countermeasures fired back, filling space with interceptors and point defense bursts, while Resolute's spinal cannon tore through a cruiser with a single shot, splitting it into 2 tumbling halves. Malik shouted over the noise of alarms. Reactor is bleeding power fast. If we keep the shields at full while running the cannon, we risk overheating. I can't balance it all. Nate shot him a glance. Figure it out. Malik hesitated, then swallowed. There's only one way. To figure it out. He sprinted out of the command deck, down into the reactor corridor, where the glow from the fusion core bathed everything in sharp blue light. Sparks flew from a junction panel where overload warnings screamed red. Malik slid across the deck, popping the manual release on an auxiliary power feed. The fix was ugly, dangerous, and every training manual said never to attempt it while the reactor was active. He jammed 2 conduits together and braced for the backlash. Malik, report. Nate's voice crackled through comms. Malik grinned, despite the heat burning his hands through the gloves. You've got power. Don't waste it. The reactor output spiked, stabilizing just enough for the spinal cannon to come online again. On the main deck, Nate gave the order. Fire. The cannon's shot lanced through the void, an intense white beam punching through layers of the planet breaker's armor. The impact ripped open a section near the main power relay, sending fragments spinning out into space. But the weapon was still charging, its massive core glowing brighter as the Empire forced it to full capacity. Nate slammed a fist into his console. Again. Same target. The second shot struck true, cutting through the exposed conduit, and the planet breaker flared with unstable energy. The defense fleet faltered. Half their command lost to power fluctuations, and still the Dreadnought advanced. Suddenly, Malik's voice gasped over comms. Dan, she's gonna blow. I can't hold this much power steady. I need to vent the secondary. Coolant manually. Nate froze. You vent that close, you're not walking out alive? Malik chuckled weakly. Yeah, well, someone's got to make sure your big gun keeps singing. Give 'em hell, Commander. The line went dead. Seconds later, reactor stability returned, but every sensor showed Malik's life signal disappearing near the auxiliary coolant bay. The planet breaker went critical, its charge collapsing into itself, before bursting outward. The explosion rolled across space like a silent wave, scattering what was left of the defense fleet and leaving only debris where the Empire's greatest weapon had been. Resolute held position through the shockwave, shields flaring and then dimming again. On Korth Prime, people stared at their feeds in silence as the impossible happened a second time. The invincible Empire's ultimate weapon had fallen to a single human ship. The first whispers of rebellion began to spread, hushed voices saying what no one had dared speak before. The Empire can be defeated in the command deck. Nate stood still, staring at Malik's station. Tessa approached quietly, setting a hand on his shoulder. He saved all of us, saved millions down there. Nate's jaw clenched. He deserved more than this, Tessa's voice lowered. We all do, but Malik knew what we signed up for. Beneath Korth Prime's surface, the Ark's power signature roared to life. It was a buried machine the size of a city, built in the Empire's earliest days as insurance against rebellion, capable of sterilizing entire biospheres within hours. Its activation tremored through the planet, setting off quakes and triggering automated evacuations. Above ground, civilians looked up at collapsing towers and streaming skies, unaware their own leaders were willing to kill them to hold power. On Resolute, the mood was heavier than battle fatigue. Malik's death hung in every glance, every silence, between orders. Even Nate, whose voice rarely shifted tone, carried a subtle crack when he spoke. "We don't have time to mourn. We take that weapon offline before it fires. Tessa, prep a strike team." "Minimal loadout, quick in and out," Tessa hesitated. "You're coming with us, aren't you?" He shook his head. "I'm running Overwatch from orbit. You're leading it. You know the system architecture better than anyone." "You're really putting me in charge of blowing up a world killer," she said, managing a humorless half-smile. "Yeah," Nate said quietly, "because you're the only one I trust to make the right call." The strike team descended in a stealth shuttle, slipping through a gap in planetary defense grids disabled earlier in the battle. The capital was chaos, streets jammed with fleeing, civilians, Imperial troops barricading squares, and automated drones running on kill protocols against anyone not wearing the right tags. Tessa led her team through a maintenance shaft into the Ark's primary control hub, a cavernous room pulsing with cold light. At its center stood something unexpected. Not just a control core, but an alien intelligence sphere, bound in energy restraints and neural tethers. Its surface shimmered as if liquid metal was trying to reshape itself, but the restraints held. "It frozen," one of the strike team whispered. "What the hell is that?" Tessa scanned it, her hand held, flashing red. "This isn't just a system AI. It's a captured consciousness. They enslaved a sentient alien to run this death machine." The alien construct spoke, voice echoing in multiple tones at once. "Release. Protocol detected. Will you end me or free me?" The room fell into silence. The mission had been simple: disable the Ark. But this, back on Resolute, Nate monitored from orbit, watching Imperial troop formations collapse as Loyalist units began abandoning posts. He opened a channel. "Tessa, report," her voice came back, tight. "They've enslaved an intelligence to run the weapon. If we kill the Ark, we kill it too." Nate paused. "What happens if you free it?" "No guarantee it doesn't retaliate," Tessa admitted. "But it's asking for freedom, not revenge. At least not yet." There was a long silence before. Nate answered, "You make the call. Just remember who we are, Tessa. We're not them." Tessa approached the control node, fingers trembling slightly as she overrode the Imperial binding code. Sparks leapt as restraints disengaged. The sphere shifted, reshaping into a smooth, almost human-like silhouette made of light. The voice changed, now quieter, deliberate. "I am free. The Ark will no longer fire. The Empire will no longer hide its sins." Data streams erupted from the control hub, broadcasting centuries of atrocities, enslaved worlds, exterminations, secret purges, directly into the galactic net. Every citizen in the Empire now saw the truth their leaders had buried. In the council spire above, Chancellor Vecren watched feeds collapse in real time. His knuckles went white around the edge of his console. "Shut it down! Shut it all down!" he shouted. But half his ministers were already gone, some arrested by security forces loyal to rebellion, others fleeing. His personal ship launched from a hidden platform, heading for orbit. On Resolute, Nate watched its signature pop up on sensors. "He's running," Nate said flatly. "Helm, intercept course. Bring him in alive." The strike team emerged from the Ark chamber just as Loyalist resistance crumbled, their weapon disabled and their crimes laid bare. Civilians stepped cautiously from hiding, some dropping their imperial flags, others smashing them underfoot. Tessa looked back at the freed alien entity one last time. It spoke softly into her ear comms, a private channel. You chose mercy, when power would have been simpler. Remember that when power tempts you. Vecren's personal shuttle locked into Resolute's docking clamps with a metallic thud. The silence on the command deck was absolute, as Nate watched the screens confirm a secure seal. His crew's faces carried the weight of everything they had done in the last 2 days. The battles, the loss of Malik, the Ark, and the millions. Who would still be alive because of their actions? Bring him to me, Nate ordered quietly. Minutes later, 2 armored Marines escorted Chancellor Vecren onto the deck. His uniform was pristine, his posture rigid, but his eyes betrayed panic. Behind the bluster, he glared at Nate as if defiance alone could undo what had just happened. You've committed an act of war against a sovereign power. Do you have any idea what you've unleashed? Nate stood slowly, stepping down from the command platform. Your power isn't sovereign, Chancellor. It's theft. You built it on corpses and fear, and now the galaxy knows it. Vecren's lip curled. You think releasing those files will change anything? Order is built on strength, not compassion. You will learn that when the next empire rises and burns your fragile little species to ash. For a moment, the deck held its breath, waiting for Nate to snap. Instead, he simply said, take him to holding. He's going to stand trial, not become a martyr. Hours later, Resolute floated in high orbit as the transmissions from the Ark continued streaming. All across the Empire, riots broke out. Entire. Garrisons laid down arms, and long-suppressed independence movements surged forward. What had once been unthinkable, an empire collapsing, was now happening in real time. On the observation deck, Tessa stood looking out at the planet below. Nate joined her, arms crossed, eyes tired but focused. You think they'll actually hold him accountable? She asked quietly. They will, Nate said, though he didn't sound convinced. Even if they don't, the Empire's over. They just haven't admitted it yet. Tessa smirked faintly, though her eyes stayed on the swirling storms over Korth Prime. Malik would have loved to see this. He'd probably be asking for a bar named after him already. Nate gave the ghost of a smile. We'll build him one back home. The two stood in silence, letting the moment breathe. Later, as the ship prepared to break orbit, a final message came from the alien intelligence they had freed. Its voice was calm, deliberate. Your mercy will echo longer than your weapons. Remember this. Those who destroy tyrants often become tyrants themselves. I leave now, but I will be watching. The transmission ended, and long-range sensors tracked the alien's energy signature vanishing into deep space. Resolute pulled away from Korth Prime, engines lighting the void, leaving the shattered empire to rebuild or collapse entirely under its own weight. No occupying army followed, no flag planted in conquest. Humanity didn't stay to claim power, only to make sure those who abused it could no longer harm anyone else. As the Dreadnought accelerated toward the jump gate, a secure transmission arrived, flagged with encryption so old it predated humanity's first contact with aliens. Tessa frowned at the console. Commander? You're gonna want to see this? Nate walked over, scanning the header, his brow furrowed. That's a black clearance code. From Earth itself. The message decrypted, a single sentence appearing on the display. Project Dreadnought. Phase 2 authorized. Tessa looked up slowly, eyes narrowing. Phase 2? What the hell does that mean? Nate stared at the words, expression unreadable. It means this isn't over. The jump gate ignited, swallowing the Dreadnought in light as it left behind a galaxy that would never be the same.